He called me worthless in front of everyone I grew up with. He laughed, tipped his glass like a man toasting a joke, and said he couldn't stand to even look at me. 30 seconds later, the lawyer read one sentence that turned the whole room upside down. Let me back up, because if you only hear the ending, you'll miss why it mattered. Our dining room looked like old money trying too hard to look effortless. Long oak table crystal that sang when you breathed too close, portraits of ancestors who never smiled. My siblings took their usual places like judges at a talent show they'd already decided, and my husband Graham leaned back like a king surveying land he hadn't farmed. Simon wore the scowl he was born with. Ava treated her champagne flute like a mirror. Laura smiled the way some people apologize while they pick your pocket. Then Graham cleared his throat, and in that silky voice that always made people think he was the adult in the room, said Emily, "How did I end up married to someone so utterly worthless? A burden I can't stand to look at." Forks paused mid-air. Someone's spoon clinked. My face stayed still, but my hands trembled under the tablecloth where no one could see. If it were you, what would you have done? The truth is that house wasn't always cruel. My mother used to sing while bread cooled on the counter. My father would ruffle my hair and call me his brightest star, and every window felt like it let in more than light. Then we buried them both coffins one long afternoon that smelled like lilies and rain and warmth left with the last hymn. After the funeral, Simon took charge like a general nobody elected. "We'll handle the estate," he told me, jabbing the air with his finger. "Numbers and decisions aren't your strengths." Ava nodded, voice smooth as marble. "Better you sit this out." Laura patted my shoulder with that soft, poisonous kindness. "Emily's fragile. Let her rest." What they meant was let her disappear. They took meetings, accounts, even keepsakes. The day I found Laura with my mother's locket, I whispered, "That's mine," and she tossed it onto the bedspread like a dare. I picked it up and said nothing. Sometimes silence isn't surrender. It's a bank account. You save what you'll need for later. Home should have been refuge, but with Graham it became another courtroom. If the coffee wasn't hot enough, he sneered. If my dress was simple, he sighed. One night he leaned against the doorframe while I folded his shirts and said, "You're lucky I even stay. Any other man would have left you." I asked why he said things like that. He looked at me like a stain he couldn't wash out. "Because it's true. No charm, no influence, no money of your own. What do you bring to the table?" I could answer that now with a ledger and a sermon. Back then I put the shirt on the pile and kept folding. You know what I mean. You keep your voice when people spend theirs on echo. Then came the clues that weren't clues so much as confessions in perfume and paper. His phone lit up at midnight with Laura's name. Their glances stayed half a beat too long, warm in a way eyes shouldn't be at family dinner. In the garden behind the hedge, his fingers grazed hers, then laced like a habit. I didn't gasp. I didn't yell. I walked back the long way, pressed a palm over my heart, and practiced breathing like it was a skill. Pattern interrupt. A scent. Sweet, sharp, not mine. I found a small bottle half under the passenger seat in his car, the brand Laura always wore. Later, a receipt fell out of his jacket while I did laundry. A hotel paid in cash 2 nights ago. When I held both out, he snatched them and perfected outrage. "You went through my things, God. Emily, hear yourself. You're paranoid, bored, lonely. Keep pushing me and I'll walk out." He said it like a gift he might take away. Do you think that's fair? That night, I took the leather box from the back of my closet. My mother had pressed it into my hands years before and said, "Open this when the time is right." Inside were letters tied with ribbon, the paper soft, from being read by someone who loved words, and a tiny recorder the size of a matchbox. I pressed the button and heard a clean click. No voice yet, just possibility. I started sitting in my father's study after midnight, a room that smelled like cedar and ink. I traced numbers in old ledgers with my fingertip, copied pages, folded receipts into the hem of my dress. The estate manager, a man who'd known me since my knees were skinned and my braids were crooked, said quietly, "Your father trusted you more than anyone, Miss Emily." Miss. That single syllable held me upright for a week. 2 days later, an envelope waited on my desk like a dare. No return address, my name in rushed ink. Inside a photograph, grainy but clear enough. Graham and Laura, the kiss framed by the guest room window. No note, no caption. Proof. I slid it under the letters and closed the box. If it were you, would you have confronted them right then or saved it for the right moment? Then the announcement spit-shined and smug. "The will is being read on Friday," Simon said, chest puffed like he'd already won. Ava clapped quietly, her rings flashing. Graham threw a look across the room that landed on Laura whether he wanted it to or not. After this, he murmured, "I'll have everything." The days between were a slow marination in cruelty. They joked about selling my childhood piano for firewood, about renting my old room to strangers, about what I'd wear when I had nothing. I held my tea with both hands and kept listening. The recorder under my dresser blinked a tiny red heartbeat. The letters waited like matches. Friday came loud. The drawing room glowed with chandelier light that made everyone look a little unreal. Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, stood with a thick folder and the steady face of a man who's done this too many times. He started small, a painting to a cousin, a silver collection, to Ava the lake house for her too, a modest trust for Laura. Simon got a minority share in the company for his years of involvement, and he sat up taller like a boy who finally got picked first. My name wasn't said. Not yet. Graham stood, lifted his glass, and poisoned the air. "Before we continue, let's be honest. You are a weak, pathetic excuse for a wife, Emily. A burden I can't stand to look at." People gasped. Some laughed. That's how cruelty works. It dares everyone to choose a side fast. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, turned a page, paused like even he needed a second, then read the sentence that split the day in half. All assets, the Carter estate, all investments, the controlling shares of Carter Holdings, and the remainder of the trust to Emily Carter. Noise died. It didn't fade. It fell off a cliff. You could hear the chandelier hum. Ava's goblet slipped and shattered. Simon's chair screeched. Laura's mouth opened and forgot to close. Graham's smirk collapsed into something small and ugly. Twist. The kind that doesn't just turn a story, it rethreads the whole seam. Fraud. Simon roared. Impossible. Ava choked. She seduced someone, didn't she? Emily always was. Graham jabbed a finger at me like accusation was a skill. Mr. Thompson snapped the folder shut. No. Independent verification contingency clauses, everything filed months ago. I opened the leather box and set the recorder on the table. My father's voice filled the room, steady, measured. If you are hearing this, we are gone. We loved you all, but we could not close our eyes to the greed that took root. Only Emily remained true. She will protect what we built. My mother's handwriting appeared next in Mr. Thompson's hands. If anyone challenges this will through deception, their claim is void. They had planned for the storm. They left us not just money, but guardrails. Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind. We met again the next morning, same room, same portraits, different posture. The cousins and staff lined the walls like witnesses. My siblings sat stiff, waiting for a verdict they weren't writing this time. I wore a navy dress my mother once zipped for me before a school ceremony, a small piece of armor. Simon tried bluster first. "This circus ends now." I said his name like a period. "Simon, sit." He sat. I started with proof because anger alone is noise. I slid photocopied ledgers across the table, each page a map, each number a breadcrumb. "Here's what you siphoned," I said. "Tiny withdrawals, slush accounts, money that went missing and reappeared in your pockets. Every cent traced. Effective immediately, you keep a roof and 4 walls because I won't make homelessness my first policy. But you are done at the company. No signatures, no access, no whispering to accountants, like they work for your temper. If it were you, would you cut him off, or give one last chance? Ava next. Offshore accounts clean as a museum label, her signature looping like a flourish at the end of a lie. Cards canceled. Luxury items locked and inventoried before dinner. The penthouse keys handed over until we determine what was bought with company funds. "You have always mistaken attention for love," I said, "and beauty for merit. Now you learn simplicity, not as punishment, as curriculum." She shook mascara tracking down her cheeks. "You wouldn't dare." "Watch me," I said, and even I heard how calm it sounded. Laura tried soft power. The "you and me, we're sisters" speech. "Yes, I made mistakes, but we can fix this." I lifted my hand and placed the photograph on the table. Gasps fluttered around us. It was the guest room window, like a frame around betrayal. "You kissed my husband in this house while I sat in the dark and held our mother's letters," I said. "You want power? Take responsibility. I'm assigning you to manage the failing Western branch. No galas, no charity balls. Payroll, supply chains, vendors calling at 7 a.m. because a truck is late. If you succeed, good. That means families keep their jobs. If you don't, you will at least understand what work feels like. Is that fair? Tell me in the comments." Honest debate. Then Graham. Sweat shone at his hairline. His tie looked strangled. "You humiliated me," I told him. "You chose volume over value. You thought you could trade me for a shinier model and an easier fortune." I lined up receipts, printed texts he forgot to delete, dates and times like stepping stones. "Banks have frozen your accounts. The company severed every tie. As of now, you are not my husband. You are a man who believed cruelty made him powerful." He laughed without humor. "You stole this from me." "You can't steal what was never yours," I said, and the room exhaled like a held breath finally let go. Then, quiet. Not peace, not yet, but the kind of silence where you can hear your own name and believe it. Here's something you might not expect me to say. I didn't come to destroy anyone. I came to set a table my parents would recognize. Mercy doesn't mean escape. Mercy means memory. You live with what you did, and you try to do better without the keys to the vault you tried to empty. So I announced a foundation. Scholarships in my mother's name, staff pensions, restored community clinics on properties we let sit empty while we collected rent and dust. We are not going to be remembered for greed. We are going to be remembered for repair. Do you think that's naive or necessary? Mr. Thompson pressed play on one last recording. My mother again, voice soft but sharp enough to cut. "You are listening because you betrayed us. The only one who did not is Emily. She will inherit not because she asked, but because she won't destroy what we built. I watched their faces as her words landed. Simon's jaw clenched. Ava stared at her nails like they had answers. Laura folded her hands and finally stopped performing sweetness. Graham looked at the floor and met his reflection in polished wood. Afternoons turned into weeks. You could feel the house changing temperature. Laughter returned to the kitchen. Invoices got paid on time. The Western branch sent a first thin green line on a chart that had been bleeding red. Not a victory lap, a direction. Laura showed up in flat shoes with under-eye circles and a notebook full of questions. That's what work looks like. Simon found a job outside the family for the first time. Honest hours. No audience. Ava learned that a mirror is kinder when you're proud of what you did that day. Graham. Some people need to meet the bottom before they build a ladder. I won't hand him rungs. I won't kick them away either. At night, I'd sit in my father's study, untie one of my mother's ribbons, and read her line again. Power tempered by mercy is the truest inheritance. I would turn off the lampstand by the window and find that strange peace that sits in your chest, like a small animal finally willing to nap. Not joy, not yet, but the field where joy might land later. When we gathered one last time to sign the final documents, Mr. Thompson said, "It is settled." I read my mother's line out loud, and watched the words hang like a blessing and a sentence. Then I walked to the door, turned once, and said what I had kept inside for too long. You thought you were burying me in shame, but you were burying yourselves. I left the room, and for the first time the portraits on the walls looked like family instead of judges. Now here's where I want your voice. Should inheritance reward character, or should it be split evenly to keep the peace? Does mercy, without strict guardrails, just enable the next round of damage? If it were, would you have gone harder or softer, more iron or more grace? I know this divides people, and maybe it should. Families aren't businesses, but they can go bankrupt. Not just in money and trust, in ordinary kindness, in the small daily credits and debits that become what your last name means when you say it out loud. We repaired the books. We are still repairing the people. If this story hit something raw, talk to me. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me the moment that grabbed you by the throat. Was it the will reading the recordings or the reckoning the next day? Do you think I went too far or not far enough? And if you've ever been underestimated, say so, because this is where we remind each other what we're worth. If you want more true, messy, honest stories told the way they really felt, hit subscribe. Tap the bell, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and add your take below. I'll be here telling it straight, one room, one page, one breath at a time.